Welcome everyone who's here. My name is Art with No Code Devs. We also have a couple members of the No Code Devs team in the chat. If you have any questions, be sure to drop them in the chat as we go. We'll either answer them in line or at the end of the webinar with a dedicated Q&A. We are super lucky to have TG and Alec here today from the Beehiiv team. Anybody who may be new to Beehiiv, it's the ESP that we use to send our newsletters, as well as thousands of other creators and newsletter publishers. It's an awesome platform. It's super powerful, super user-friendly, and it's growing like crazy. The features, in my opinion, are unparalleled to any other platform. So really excited to talk about email newsletters, how you can grow your newsletter, scale your newsletter, monetize your newsletter probably. But I'll go ahead and pass it off to TG and Alec for this presentation. And let's go ahead and get started.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Art, for the introduction. Welcome, everybody. TG and I are super excited for this presentation. Hopefully you guys learned something and definitely try your best to stay towards the end because we're going to have some goodies in the end that I think could be really valuable for people just starting out. Also, just one note that Art mentioned, if you guys could hold your questions till the end, that'd be best. If you want to put the questions in the chat while I'm going, I'm not going to be looking at the chat. I'll be looking at my screen, but we'll take a note of that and address them towards the Q&A at the end. TG, anything to add before we hop in?
Excited, guys. Really excited to share some insights with you and dive in.
Amazing. Okay, let's get started. So we're here to present today on email newsletters, the founder's secret weapon. So here's just a little overview of what we're going to be discussing. First, we're going to be discussing 3 key benefits of founders starting their newsletters. One, we have owning distribution and building in public. Benefit number 2 is direct access to your users. And benefit number 3 is thought leadership. One thing just to mention here is, at Beehiiv, like Art mentioned, we've been growing pretty quickly. Last year, we sent out over 1 billion emails. We have over 40,000 active newsletters. So we're able to look under the hood and sort of see, the founders that are starting newsletters, where are they really, what are they focused on? What are they getting their benefits from? So this was, part of the analysis in that, these 3 benefits, which we're going to highlight. Number 4 is tips and tricks to get started with your newsletter, some content ideas, some different strategies. Number 5 is going to be all about scaling. Once you start your newsletter, hopefully by this point in the presentation, you're convinced that newsletter is the way to go. I'm sure if founders starting to grow an audience, we're going to talk about how you can scale that newsletter. And then lastly, before the Q&A, we're going to be talking all about monetizing, and that you have a newsletter. How can you use that to build another income stream as you're growing your business? And lastly, we're going to have the Q&A as mentioned previously. So without further ado, let's hop in to benefit number 1. So benefit number 1 in starting a newsletter as a founder is owning distribution and building in public. So let's focus on owning distribution for a moment. Control is huge. I even just, have a personal story where when I was first starting out with content, I was focused a lot on LinkedIn and posting on LinkedIn, and I was posting every day. And then one day randomly, I saw my reach and impressions on LinkedIn slash and drop by like 50%. And I actually reached out to a couple of friends who are also focused on growing their LinkedIn. And it seemed like everyone was facing this issue. Overnight, the algorithm was changed in a certain way, which we didn't have access to because algorithms basically are a big black box, and our distribution was pretty much halved overnight. So it's something, unfortunately, that's possible by growing on social media. If you're growing on X, LinkedIn, whatever it is, you don't really have control, and your algorithms dictate. The algorithms are dictating your reach. Also, if you all don't mind just putting your microphone on mute, I think I'm picking up on some other audio coming up. Thanks so much. So number 2 is consistency. By growing an email newsletter, you're ensuring a consistent delivery to your audience without worrying about platform changes. This is similar to the first point on control, but once again, like we all know someone who was subject to a random ban on a platform. Say they were growing their Instagram or growing their X. Overnight, they were banned. They have to go and fight it, even if they didn't do anything. To be honest, that was wrong. This could happen from time to time. There are also platform changes. The next one is longevity, which also is related. What would have happened if someone was a Friendster influencer with, I don't even know what they were called, like let's say 1 million friends or whatever it is. It's not really a lasting asset. Email, social media comes and goes, different platforms are in, maybe Snapchat might be in, Instagram might be in. Email has proven time and time again to be a lasting asset. And your email list stays with you regardless of changes in social media. Even if you migrate, say for the past couple of years, you've been growing an email newsletter, yourself or another platform, and you want to migrate over to Beehiiv, that's something you could bring with you. You truly own it. And the last point, and this is transitioning more from owning distribution to building in public. One thing that we've seen time and time again, especially recently in the past few years, and I think this has to do with, people on social media maybe being a little bit more vulnerable, people wanting to know the stories of what they're buying, from who they're buying from, and not just the end product, but the focus on building in public. I've seen so many founders that have been able to, triple X, quadruple X their business just by sharing their stories, by sharing their successes, their failures, their challenges. And I really been able to see this firsthand, both within Beehiiv reviewing sort of newsletters as a whole, and then also seeing people posting on social media. So we're going to talk about some examples. I think the first examples that we have here on the next slide are two separate founders. Number one, we have Tyler Dank, founder and CEO of Beehiiv. I'm going to reference him a couple of times since we work very closely together, obviously. And Tyler's a great example of this. He started Big Desk Energy, which is his email newsletter. And he uses this primarily to talk all about stories, the successes, the failures, the growth trajectory of Beehiiv. And it's actually interesting because, it even sort of influences, I think, employees and talent. I could say personally, before I joined Beehiiv, one of the first things that I did was I read a bunch of Tyler's newsletters on Big Desk Energy. I read about the company, I read about the culture, I read about the growth, sort of the mission, their key values. And I determined for me, like, that would be an awesome place to be. And I haven't looked back since, and I'm very happy for that. But, this is a great example. And we, I don't have the 100% proof for this, but I can almost guarantee that we've had a lot of people convert to Beehiiv customers on paying subscriptions just from discovering Big Desk Energy, from reading Tyler's emails, from reading his newsletter. So, that's a key example here. And also, Tyler's been able to grow it pretty substantially over the past few months. Another example we have here is actually someone who I'm pretty friendly with. His name is Dan McCormick. Really great guy. Very, very, very smart. He has a company called Create, which makes creatine gummies. You might have seen him on X. He posts a lot on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And he really does a great job of completely going under the hood and just building in public for everyone to see, to the extent that every month, I'm pretty sure he used to do this, I think he still does, he shares revenue numbers, he shares profit, he shares the areas that he's planning on growing and expanding in, he shares successes, he shares failures. And even just going through the replies to that tweet, you see so many people who are rooting for him, who have different partnership opportunities, who might say, hey, Dan, it looks like 30% of your budget was towards Facebook ads. I think you could cut that, and drop that to 25% and move the other 5% to TikTok Shop. Whatever it is, you just see firsthand sort of the power in having him share. And he's being able to grow a pretty big audience through that as well. So those are a few examples. TGL, if you have anything to chime in, would love to hear.
Yeah, definitely. I think one other one that comes to mind is obviously it's a great opportunity to just document the journey and what you're doing. I think like validating ideas
is sort of coming a little, not like in and out, but it's a little staticky. I don't know if it's how you're holding the camera or something, or is anyone else hearing that, or is it just me?
Awesome. Well, give me 1 sec. Let me just switch my mic, but keep going. I'll jump in.
All right, sure. So hopefully TG will get that fixed. I'll keep going, and then we'll go back and TG can add his comments. Okay, so benefit number 2, we're going to talk about direct access to your users. So this is another clear benefit that starting an email newsletter as a founder has. Number 1 is intimacy. Starting an email newsletter can really help you get a complete direct line to your audience. It allows for personalized and open communication about your product and service. I even think, social media is a lot less intimate than emails. Personally, if someone's showing up in my email inbox, that means that I get a lot of spam also, but it means that, like, if I don't unsubscribe, I actually want them there, versus social media, especially with, like, the For You feeds or whatever. it could be a nightmare at times. That's a whole other webinar and a whole other conversation, but it allows you to really develop this intimacy. Number two is engagement. We see a lot higher engagement rates because emails land directly in the inbox of your subscribers. Some of our best newsletters might have engagement rates of open rates of 50 to 70%, which is absolutely massive. And click-through rates also, we see pretty high click-through rates as well. And lastly, data. You're able to get and gain a lot of valuable insights through open rates, click-through rates, and other metrics to really understand your audience better. And this is data that sometimes, a social media provider won't be able to provide for you. So, I think direct access could be a huge thing. I have a few examples too to touch on this point of different newsletters. One is the famous Tim Ferriss. So funny. I really grew up reading his stuff, and he was sort of like a role model of mine. I think the 4-Hour Work Week influenced definitely a lot of people. And he has a newsletter he sends out on Friday called 5 Bullet Friday, and it's all about different gadgets and books and hacks and even recipes that he is focused on or toyed with that week. And to me, like when I started reading this newsletter, Tim went from being someone who was like up there in the clouds, this startup entrepreneur guy, to like an actual real person with emotions and with hobbies and with interests. And it was just a really great example for me of being able to develop intimacy with with your end consumer. These are people who you can nurture, to eventually, in Tim's case, buy your books, join your community, listen to your podcast, whatever it is, whatever he was selling. Another great example of this is actually a personal friend of mine from university, whose name is Maura. She has a startup called Hello Mortal, which sounds a little morbid, but it's actually, very beautiful. Where basically, if you think about what the Knot is doing for weddings and wedding planning, she is sort of focused on end of life. So she's focused on really funerals and end of life planning. And she's been able to grow it pretty considerably. And what she does on Beehiiv every month is that she has a newsletter, and she talks a lot about like different product updates. The newsletters to investors, close friends, family, supporters. So different product updates, what's worked, what hasn't worked. I remember one thing, just anecdotally, that she sent out like a sort of like a survey that I actually filled out, where you could sort of, she asked about different new features, and she wanted to do a test, like, an A/B test with some people, and, having an email newsletter with your customer subscribers, allowing these like open opportunities for A/B tests, whatever it is, could really allow them to feel like they're building with you and rooting and supporting you and your journey. And that's personally, how I feel reading Maura's newsletter. So another great example really of building intimacy with your end customers and really nurturing that relationship. Let's try TG again. Maybe
I think we're back. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's me.
I went ahead and switched just to the old wired headphones. So
love it.
Always deliver. Cool. Yeah. What I was trying to mention before, I think there's so many benefits of documenting the journey. And that's kind of, newsletters is such a great tool to do that. I think one of the points a few slides back that I wanted to make was it lets you also validate ideas and create some really good feedback loops around some of the things you're doing. One of the stories I wanted to mention that we mentioned Tyler Dank's Big Desk Energy newsletter, but he's been documenting sending investor updates every month. It allows him to kind of share the journey with people. But what's cool, if you do decide to raise money, one of the interesting things, when we raised our Series A, was he already had, this list of investors that he was nurturing over time, which was really cool. So they already were like part of the journey, that intimacy that Alec mentioned. And when he mentioned, hey, we're actually going to raise some money now, they closed that round in like less than like 2 or 3 days. So it's also a benefit just for having that connection with, in that case, investors, or customers, et cetera. But that's just another benefit of having a newsletter as kind of something that you're leveraging.
Awesome. I love that. Let's hop into benefit number 3, which is thought leadership. This is probably the most common one that we see across founders in newsletters and founders in content in general. And thought leadership is, one of the big benefits there is authority, really establishing your authority, positioning yourself and your startup as industry leaders by sharing valuable insights and content. We see this, we'll go into more examples, but I think everyone could probably think of different examples of this. Next is trust, building trust and credibility with your audience by consistently delivering. A great example I like to think of is I have a friend who's actually a financial advisor, and he has an email newsletter where he sends updates all about like every week. I'm like, okay, this is, these are the funds that I'm watching. This would be my 20-year plan. This is, how to set up automatic investments to your Roth IRA. And by really like delivering in thought leadership, you can say, okay, this is someone who I would trust managing my money. And I think we can see that across lots of different industries. And lastly is influence. So a lot of people that, share thought leadership and are really, driving that forward have a lot of opportunities open up to them just by the influence they're able to really manage. And also one thing I just want to mention here, when a lot of people hear about thought leadership and influence, they think, okay, I need a minimum of like, a couple 100,000 followers on LinkedIn and X. That's absolutely not true. Even if you're within like a tight-knit industry, it's not necessarily like how many people you're following, how many people you're interacting with, but it's the right people and who you're interacting with. And I've seen people with a couple hundred followers really be able to be thought leaders in the space because they're talking about something that they understand more than anyone else. I've seen that all like with newsletters, for instance. I know someone who runs ads for newsletters who has maybe a couple hundred followers, and he's been able to, sign some really big clients just because people are seeing he's consistently putting out great content and he has influence within that space. So now I'll hop into a few different examples here. Number one on the left, we have Beehiiv newsletter called Journals GG. And this is Dan. And he has a newsletter all about stocks, crypto, investing. And he also has an agency where he helps people both like grow newsletters and also helps them with financial planning as well. So this is, he uses his newsletter once again in his thought leadership on the market to really, drive forward his business. Another example that we see here is the Saturday Solopreneur. Most people are probably familiar with Justin Welsh. He really, I don't even know if he coined the term solopreneur, but he's really come to like dominate that word and dominate that term, which just shows you the power of true thought leadership. So, he has a newsletter called the Saturday Solopreneur, which is all about practical tips, to getting your first dollar, to going full-time to solopreneurship. And he has been able to really focus on that and really lead through thought leadership. TG, anything to add?
No, man, those are great examples.
Awesome. And just a reminder, feel free to throw some questions in the chat, and we'll make sure to address them in the Q&A. Okay, so hopefully by now, with those three benefits, you're convinced, okay, you got to start a newsletter. It's a great way to grow and drive my business forward as a founder. Now let's talk about how to actually get started. This is a little checklist I created for you guys. So number one, you want to define your goals. First, sit down, ask yourself, what do you want to achieve with your newsletter? Do you want to focus on building brand awareness, lead generation, customer engagement? What is it that you want to focus on? What's the end goal? And then we'll make a plan on how to get there. Next, this should be a very easy question to answer, which is selecting the email marketing platform that suits your needs. TG and I might be a little biased, but we definitely think Beehiiv is the way to go. We'll have some things later on the webinar when we're talking about scaling and monetizing some unique features that Beehiiv offers, which I really think makes it the best place to grow and scale an email newsletter. Next, we have building your list. Everyone here probably has at least a couple hundred email addresses through their personal Gmails. Now, I'm not saying to just throw them in to your email newsletter without their permission, but these are definitely emails that you can reach out to, maybe ask if they would want to, subscribe or sign up for your newsletter. You also have, social media, LinkedIn and X, pin a post on the top there. Let everyone know that you're launching this newsletter, really grow out on other channels, create valuable content. I mean, this really is like, obviously at the end of the day, what it's about: consistent, valuable content that provides value to your audience. Pick an angle if you want it to be educational, inspiring, entertaining. Next is designing your newsletter. You want to make sure it's beautiful and visually appealing, mobile friendly. Again, these are all things that I think at Beehiiv we make very, very easy and intuitive for you. And lastly, it's sending and optimizing. You want to make sure you're regularly sending out newsletters, pick a cadence, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, bi-monthly. Try to pick a cadence and be consistent and stick to that. TG, anything to add?
Yeah, I think one of the things I hear a lot is just, especially if you haven't written or created before, is like, how are you going to do this consistently? I think, leverage, I like to leverage some of these AI ChatGPT prompts around ideas to kind of create outlines. So like that as a step can be very helpful for not staring at a blank page. And then just create the habit of just starting to write every day, especially on the newsletter side. Start, I would say weekly. And then once you kind of build that habit up, you can increase the frequency if you want, weekly or even every 2 weeks. But that's kind of, at least initial getting started advice if you haven't actually launched a newsletter yet, and then build that up over time.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely great advice. Okay, cool. This is one of my favorite slides I actually put together. I think it's one of the most practical and valuable slides for founders. So this is different content pillars that founders can actually pull from, and some different examples of people who are utilizing this to write their newsletter. So number one is founder insights and lessons learned. What I mentioned here is, again, Tyler Denk, CEO and co-founder of Morning Brew with Big Desk Energy. It's actually, it's really fascinating because I actually see this firsthand being an employee at Beehiiv. I'm sure TG, feels similarly, but, Tyler will say one day, we're going to focus on weekly success lists, and I'll see that being really implemented into the company. And then, a week or a few months later, whatever it is, I see, a newsletter job from Tyler, which is all about how we at Beehiiv use weekly success lists to drive forward growth. So really, he's focused on founder insights, lessons learned. Number two is industry trends and analysis. Ben Thompson does a great job of this with his newsletter, Stratechery, which is all about his analysis of different events that are going on, whether it's acquisitions, IPOs. He really does a great job of sort of honing in and focusing on what's going on in the market. Next is product development updates. Like I mentioned, Hello Mortal by Mora, the startup that deals with end-of-life planning, does a really, really great job of this. This really helps develop, once again, intimacy with your end customers, helps you obviously build that rapport and relationship with them. Even inviting a small part of them, for instance, to, partake in an A/B test or to partake in, a beta test, whatever it is, could be really valuable. Next, we have building in public. Like I mentioned, Dan from the Creatine Gummy Company really does a great job of this. If you want to go to his Twitter feed, I think it's Dan McCormick. I'm not sure exactly what it is. If you type in his name, I'm sure you'll find it, and you'll see, monthly updates, sharing everything under the hood, whether that's revenue numbers, profit numbers. It's really, really something, a sight to behold. It's very fascinating. And again, I'd encourage you to look at the responses for people, how, excited they are for him, how they're encouraging him, how he's getting new opportunities from that. So I would definitely recommend that. Also, just as an aside, there are a lot of companies I've seen actually doing a great job with this as well, with short form video on TikTok as well. A lot of people that are short of sharing their stories with building in public. So that could be a good thing to utilize and then potentially drive people to your newsletter to read more in-depth stories about what's going on from the video. Next is growth and marketing strategies. The Demand Curve by Neil Grady does a great job of this, where he writes about simple growth strategies that, drive businesses forward. And he actually uses this for his agency called the Bell Curve, sort of to do all these things, to build thought leadership, to build intimacy with his clients, to share a story. So that's something that's worked very well for him. And lastly, this is something that TG actually mentioned earlier on the webinar: investor communication. Tyler, once again, did a great job of this, developing and nurturing that relationship with investors. And like he mentioned, when we opened up our Series A, it was closed within a few days because he had already built that rapport and connection with investors. TG, anything to add here?
Yeah, no, I think a couple other examples I just throw on here just as like bonuses. Probably, Matt McGarry is also a good example. He runs an agency, so more of a service business. I don't know if there's anyone here that essentially have like service-based businesses, productized services agencies, but he does a great job of just documenting the journey, sharing content, building trust through the newsletter, that where he's able to monetize through agency services on the back end, and then also the boring marketer does a similar service as well. And they both have really great newsletters. They do offer like SEO services, but I always like to throw in a couple other examples and maybe a little different that are great use cases if you want to check out what they're doing.
Great. Yeah, those are definitely great examples. Okay. Moving forward here, we're towards the end. So thank you for powering through. We'll have time at the end again for Q&A. I see the chat section, filling up with questions. So really encourage you. No questions are bad questions. Feel free to throw them here, throw them on the chat, and we'll be happy to take a look and answer. Okay, so now let's get to the fun part. The fun part is you already decided you're starting a newsletter. You launch it, you design it, you come up with the first few posts, whatever it is, first few sends. Now let's talk about growing your newsletter. So this is what we see working at Beehiiv for our newsletters. It's like a list of 6 things that we would highly recommend utilizing. Number 1 is leveraging incentives, and that's using a referral program to encourage subscribers to share your content. So what comes to mind when I think about leveraging, referral programs is Morning Brew. If you guys are familiar with it, big newsletter, all about like business news that was actually acquired by Business Insider. Also, fun fact: a lot of the Morning Brew team, early team, ended up, starting Beehiiv. So we have a lot of Morning Brew talent that is now at Beehiiv. They were really able to build this referral program. It's something that we have, in-house now at Beehiiv. The example that I think they did, thinking back, was if you share their newsletter once, you get access to like a bonus newsletter on Sundays. I think it was called the Light Roast. If you share it 3 times, maybe you get some stickers, 5 times, a t-shirt, a mug. I don't remember exactly what it was, but you get the point. This could either be physical, where it could be, swag, for instance, or it could be something digital. It could be, access to the blueprint on how to scale your newsletter in 30 days. It could be access to a certain community. It could be access to an additional newsletter that only people who are first subscribers get. Great way to grow your newsletter. Number 2 is partnering with similar creators. This also, we've seen time and time again, is a great way to expand your reach. You might say to me, Alec, I only have an audience of 1,000. They've all seen my information already. And I would say, go try to find somebody you collaborate with, where you could both help nurture each other's audiences. An example I like to think of here is, let's say, you have someone who's focused on investing, like on the stock market in America, right? And he posts a lot about that. He has a newsletter on that. You might want to find someone who's maybe based in England or France, someone in Europe who focuses also in a similar industry on the stock market. And it could be really great to collaborate with him. Maybe write a post together, write a blog together, share some content together. And I'm sure that's a great way to expand your reach, finding people who are already interested in investing, maybe in a different market. And I'm sure that's a great way to grow your newsletter. Next, this is a point that we keep driving. I think there was a question about it in the chat, so we'll address it. Really writing consistently, the best cadence is something that you could stick to. Ultimately, if you really want to grow and scale out your newsletter, more content, as long as it's able to maintain that level of quality, is always recommended. Next, which is related to that, is repurposing your content. You want to make sure that, anytime you post something, I think I listened to something, I believe Justin Welsh or Dan Coe, one of them said it, where when you write your newsletter, that is like the HQ for your content for the week. And then you could, sprinkle little pieces of your newsletter into LinkedIn posts, into X posts, and break it down and make sure you're repurposing it. And a great strategy also is to post a little bit, like even a little preview. Like say you have, an email newsletter on 5 tips to grow your newsletter. Post tips like 1 and 2 online, and say, 1 and 2 on LinkedIn, and say, if you're interested in the full list, like, feel free to subscribe to my newsletter, pin it right in your comments. And that's a great way, obviously, to drive traffic to your newsletter. Next is creating win-win environments. Again, you really want to lead with high quality, engaging with your audience, encouraging good feedback, posting high quality content. And the last thing is paying to play. So, one of the benefits with growing a newsletter is you don't really need to rely on advertising. But if you're really trying to accelerate that growth, it could be a great thing to do. If you're interested in specific people or agencies, I have a few that I could recommend offline. TG, anything to add there?
Yeah, I got a couple of minutes actually. Piggybacking on what you just said, acquiring email subs, great growth strategy. It's going to be the most cost-effective way to get people into your ecosystem as well. Acquiring an email sub is going to be a lot less than driving them, let's say, directly to buy a product or demo or sell services. So that is a great place to start, especially if you have this funnel and nurturing kind of everything we talked about today kind of in line. As well, thinking about your newsletter as that lead domino. Alec mentioned this as well. It's just that's the best place. The written word, getting your thoughts out. That can be a script for a video. That can be repurposed on Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. So the newsletter is one of the best kind of starting points in that creation process. Circling as well to the referral incentive. Again, Beehiiv has this built into the referral program. I think what we've seen work really well here is just a single referral as a gift. Just one referral kind of unlocks something, getting someone from 0 to 1. This is a huge growth strategy, for example, with Milk Road, where, they drove, I think it was like over 50,000 subs organically for free, just from people referring other subscribers to unlock this resource and like kind of a lead magnet on the back end. And then the last part I'll mention here that came to mind as well is just, when you're sending an email, again, on Beehiiv, it lets you also post online. So that's a great thing to take advantage of, especially if you want to tie in and essentially turn every email you write into a blog post. You also get the SEO benefits. So that's a great way to kind of write once and then kind of duplicate that online as well. Where previously in the past, emails were very siloed. Once you wrote an email, it's kind of gone, right? So anyways, those were 4 additional things I just kind of thought of.
Awesome. Love it. Thanks for chiming in there. Okay. Now we'll talk about what's even more fun than growing your newsletter, which is monetizing and making some money off your newsletter. So let's talk about a couple different examples of how you can monetize your newsletter. Number one is subscription-based model. A great example of this is what I mentioned before, Ben Thompson, who has a premium newsletter where he offers premium content for paying subscribers. They get, incentivized subscriptions. Another example I saw of this, I'm forgetting the exact newsletter, but I think they, offer like the best remote job opportunities, and they might, have 10, the regular subscribers get 10 opportunities a week. And I think if you pay like the subscription, whatever it is, you get access to an additional 10 or 15 job opportunities. So that's a great way to unlock revenue in your newsletter. Next is sponsorships and advertising. And the Beehiiv ad network really, really makes this intuitive and super easy, where you actually don't even need to source your own ad opportunities. They get fed to you. So once you sign up for that Beehiiv and start growing your account, you'll see incoming ad opportunities from Beehiiv from recognizable brands and startups in your industry. Again, that's something we're really prioritized and focused on, and a lot of newsletters have really benefited from that, and brands as well on the advertising side. Next is the Beehiiv Partner Program. That's what TG and I are focused on day in and day out, where you can integrate your partner link into your newsletter. Our partner program is super, super unique and fascinating. We offer 50% of referred revenue for the first 12 months. We also have a cool beach club where the top partner gets an all-exclusive paid vacation with a +1 to a cool island. This quarter happens to be Aruba. People are interested in signing up for the partner program, they could feel free to reach out to us, TG and myself. Next is selling products or services. You could promote, your own digital or physical products. We have, examples of brands, of newsletters that have been able to make a lot of money through this. And lastly is Beehiiv Boosts, where you can earn money on Beehiiv by recommending other newsletters to your subscribers. So if you think about, when you subscribe to a newsletter, sometimes you might see, other relevant newsletters that might be good options. And if someone actually goes and subscribes to that newsletter, you're going to get paid for that as well. TG, anything to add on the monetizing side?
Yeah, I was going to say one good example is the Rundown. .ai. If you guys want to see like just a newsletter that's monetizing, I think in many creative ways. So they have AI University course, they have a job board, they also have AI tools, and then they also monetize via sponsorships. So they're a good example of like incorporating, a nice pronged monetization approach. So that one just came to mind as you were talking.
Awesome. The AI craze is still hot. Awesome. Okay, cool. That is, we'll open up Q&A in a second here, but, just want to shout out, first off, no code devs for, Art Taylor and the team for hosting this webinar with us, inviting us to come and host and present. Hopefully you guys found this very beneficial and enjoyable. They were, kind enough to provide you guys with a discount to Beehiiv, where, if you sign up at this link, I think we'll also drop it in the chat section. If someone wants to do that, if not, I could drag it in there, as well as in the follow-up email. Feel free to sign up. You're going to get 20% off for the first 3 months and a free trial for the first 30 days, where you can test out some of our more premium features as well. So, highly recommend that. Again, really, think Beehiiv is the best platform out there for growing and scaling your newsletter. And with that, TG and I would love to answer any questions that you guys might have. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, guys. I mean, I agree with everything you said completely. I've been a Beehiiv user for quite some time, way before a lot of these awesome features that we just heard about were even available, and just been able to see the platform grow over the years is it's truly amazing. And if you're not a Beehiiv customer already, or you don't follow them on social media, you will soon learn, if you start to follow them or become a customer, that they ship new features at a rate that's insane. And it's awesome as a customer, because you get all kinds of new features all the time. A couple of things I just wanted to touch on is, you talked about boosts and way to monetize your newsletter. I think I can speak for myself, but also I think there's a lot of other newsletter creators out there that are actually paying for their Beehiiv subscription just through Boost and the ad network. We are certainly doing it, and then plus some. So I think that it's really not too unrealistic to think that you can, at a minimum, pay for your Beehiiv subscription with Boost and ads, and then add additional revenue onto that pretty easily. I also liked how you talked about social. I think a lot of the tips that you shared were super important, and you should sort of like tease your newsletter content through social and share it. Of course, they do create posts as well, so you get that sort of SEO juice on the web, which is really nice. But it's also really nice. It goes the other way too. You can easily share rich content from social in your newsletter. So that could be like an X post. It could be a TikTok video. It could be a YouTube video. The newsletter is very powerful in that it can handle all kinds of rich content and make it easy to share things from your social that might not normally make it into your newsletter. So really like that as well. Okay, so I'll stop talking. There's a bunch of questions, so I'm just going to sort of go through them here and you guys can answer them. I want to make sure that we get through them all before we run out of time. So a couple of the questions were similar, but the first one from James is, my question is about consistency. How often do you actually send a newsletter? What do people like, or does it depend on your goals? I know you touched on this a little, but if you could offer any more tidbits about that, that'd be helpful.
For sure. It could happen that then maybe TG could add something. I mean, the thing that I would say is the best consistency is the best cadence is a consistency you could actually stick to, which is a little bit of a cop-out answer. Like I said, I think it depends a little bit on your goals. I've seen people who've been able to grow their newsletter by sharing something monthly, like once a month, which is really it shouldn't be too overwhelming to do that. Obviously, more is better. At least weekly I've seen is sort of it could be a good cadence, but you shouldn't feel discouraged if it feels crazy to send out a newsletter daily. It doesn't have to be the goal right away. Again, finding something you could stick to. I don't know, TG, if you want to add something that you might have some ideas.
Yeah, I definitely don't recommend doing daily because it's hard to once you start that, it's hard to scale back. because then you kind of for training, getting people used to it. So yeah, starting monthly and then increasing your cadence as you kind of build up the muscle of writing. I think one thing, I think James, you had asked that around, what do I write about as well? I think in a question down below, and how do I do this consistently? I think think about all the pain points you're solving. Outline, like what I try to do is outline a doc with as many things as possible. Because I think the more you can kind of set yourself up for success on the writing side, and pull from ideas again, rather than staring at a blank page, that can really help. And then just, focus on go monthly to start and just try to write every day. Open that Beehiiv editor. It's beautiful. It's minimal. You can just kind of focus and then, work up a posting cadence and, from there essentially. So that's at least the best advice, I think, just as you get started.
Yeah, and you can use another feature within Beehiiv is you can use polls within Beehiiv to poll your audience on different things like this, what they'd like to see more of, how often they want to see it, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's great. All right, next question, Darren. Hi, Darren, by the way. We go way back. It's good to see you here. He has a list of 2,000 folks in his niche, 40% open rate, but he feels like his niche is very small. He's struggling with knowing if he should expand what I write about or stay laser focused on his niche, which happens to be glide apps. Any advice there?
Wait, did he say what his niche was, or he didn't say? I missed the end there.
It's glide apps, which is if you're not familiar with glide, for anyone or you guys, it's a no code website and app builder.
Got it. I would say it goes back to what his goal is with the newsletter, right? Like what's his goal? It's something that I mentioned before. Is it to scale up for different advertising opportunities? Is it to build thought leadership, right? If he, for instance, someone who has a glide apps agency who is looking for, new clients to build glide apps and everything, I would say definitely don't expand your niche. Focus hard on that. Be the go-to person there. If he's looking to scale up, talk about potentially other tools, get new inbound ad opportunities, then I would say maybe it makes sense to either grow that newsletter, or you could keep that newsletter very specific, start another newsletter more on, overall tools based on the knowledge he knows, and sort of, have the best of both worlds approach there. And he could even, mention to his original community, his original newsletters, hey, just a heads up, I'm going to keep this newsletter very specific on glide apps, but I'm starting a newsletter which is going to be focused a little bit more broad. That's something, we've seen people could definitely have multiple newsletters where they could have the best of both worlds there. TG, what do you got to say about that?
Yeah, I think maybe looking at kind of what your goals are, if the goals to, secure sponsorships, that might be, you might want to go a little bit more broad, because 2,000 people isn't going to maybe drive the sponsorship revenue that you would maybe want to get from a list size like that. But it sounds like, yeah, if it's more of an agency, and Art, looks like Darren pretty well. Is it like an agency that builds these apps for people?
I think he does. I'm not 100% sure, but I think he does have an agency component to his business. But he's still in the chat. He said he's trying to. He said that growth is sort of his goal, so he's leaning towards option 2.
Okay, yeah. So if that's the case, then yeah, I mean, having a audience size actually is great. I've seen people with much smaller audiences build very substantial businesses that are very niche. So again, I think it's maybe looking at how you're positioning and the content you're creating, where you're pointing people to, as well could be good to kind of look at from a monetization side.
Awesome. All right. Well, hopefully that's helpful, Darren. Next question, James. How do you repurpose your content without feeling like those in the newsletter are getting hit twice with the same content?
Good question. I a couple things to say about this. One is I wouldn't even be so scared that people are getting hit twice from your content. I think that if it's good content and it's helpful to people, I don't think you're likely to lose subscribers or followers on social media. Plus, just with social media in general, there's a good chance that unless someone has their notifications turned on to your new post, they might not be seeing it. And even if they do, it's not the end of the world. If that's still a concern, there are things that you could do to repurpose the content in a way something that I mentioned before is maybe you want to tease like a couple lines from your newsletter on social. You could change up some examples. If you're talking about something, you could put a different example in these social posts that you don't have in the email newsletter, changing up the language, keeping it very simple. But ultimately, I think good content performs everywhere. And I wouldn't be so concerned about, people feeling like they're getting hitting twice. That's just my opinion. I've seen people share the exact same thing and they get, they still get a lot of love and interaction and feedback, both from their newsletter and from social.
Yeah, I would just add. Go ahead, Art.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think that most of the time the audiences are different and there might be some overlap, but especially with social, I mean, people expect to see a lot of things. And I think if they see it twice, it's not that big of a deal, but running the risk of not having some new exposure through that other audience is greater than having the person see it twice.
Yeah, I would just say the odds of them seeing it twice, is probably lower than you think. Just because, people are in their own little bubble, and the downside of them seeing it twice, is usually a non-issue.
Awesome. Some other questions. I think we could just touch on this one very quickly. What types of referrals work best? Digital freebies, merch, etc. My takeaway was, the best thing to do, at least in the beginning, is get someone from 0 to 1. So get a small win from them sharing your newsletter with one person, give them something valuable, and then you probably want to scale up from there. So if that valuable thing is a simple digital product or a guide, they share it 10 times, maybe you can give them, some merch or something that's a little bit more substantial. But I think we touched on this, but if you have anything else to add, you certainly can.
Yeah, I think it depends on one question I think it's great to ask yourself is why. It's a question you should be asking yourself constantly, not just with newsletters. If you have an agency, if you have a business, just in life, why should someone subscribe to your newsletter, and try to match that incentive with the incentive for the giveaway. So I think the reason Morning Brew was able to grow so quickly is why are people signing up? They're signing up because they're interested in news and getting really bite-sized package news information delivered to them in a way that's easily understandable. So their first thing to move people from 0 to 1 is hey, I know you already are enjoying our newsletter. How about an extra email each week that sort of summarizes everything? So it's really aligning the interests of why someone would subscribe with, what the benefit, what the extra incentive they're getting is. So I'd recommend focusing on the why and having that first 0 to 1 be very focused on delivering that.
Yeah, the congruency I think is huge, and that's kind of what Alec alluded to. I think as well, leveraging Beehiiv surveys is really powerful, especially when someone does subscribe. Leveraging that moment in time when they are kind of on your site and they're going through that sign up flow. Beehiiv makes it really seamless to ask questions as well, figuring out what's most important to them, what's the biggest pain point they're facing at the moment. I've seen those really well because that's not only owning your audience, but you're capturing this first party data and building up kind of some really powerful data points on what do I create for a lead magnet or referral giveaway, and a lot of those decisions can be driven from those survey responses.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. Another one here. I've seen some, not conflicting, but I've seen various different sort of data points on this one. But what about sort of scrubbing lists regularly? So you have an email list, but over time, some of those subscribers will become inactive. They're not opening or clicking through your email, which may hurt open and click through rates, which may deter potential advertisers from advertising with your newsletter, whether it's through the ad network or just sort of sold independently. Are there any best practices around scrubbing lists to remove inactive subs? Do you recommend this generally? How often should you do it? We don't have to go into great detail, but if you have any sort of insights on what you would recommend for this, that would be great.
Sure. GG, I'll hand it to you. I think you'd be able to answer this better.
Yeah. No, so I've for all my newsletters as well, and I help people do this, is in segments. You can actually create an automation flow where essentially you can automate the inactive users in Beehiiv. So it's pretty cool. It's for example, if someone hasn't clicked or opened an email in 3 months, you can then move them to kind of an inactive pool. So definitely recommend that if you can. It's actually fairly easy. You can kind of set it up once in Beehiiv, and then that is kind of running in the background. And you can kind of set that timeline, however you'd like. Is it 3 months? Is it 2 months? How strict do you want to be on that? But yeah, obviously removing that vanity metric of just a high number of subscribers and focusing on quality or, you know, quality subs, I think is kind of the main goal there.
Awesome. Yeah, that's super helpful and hopefully helpful for the group. James has another question here. How do you start getting your first subscribers when starting from scratch? Not a huge social following, no existing email lists, etc. What would you recommend?
Yeah, $1 million question here. What I would recommend is, first up, there are a lot of ways, in my opinion, that you can get, even if you don't have a big social following, that you can get your newsletter in front of people. There's ways where you could spend money getting it in front of people. Things like boosts, things like potentially driving ads. But there are plenty of ways where, without spending money, you can get it in front of people. Whatever it is you're writing on, maybe try to find some online communities that are focused on that, like a Reddit page, or Discord groups, WhatsApp groups, whatever it is. And without directly plugging your newsletter, what I've seen work really well is, like, let's just say, for example, you're writing about, I don't know, fantasy football, right? And like you have a fantasy football newsletter. I spoke to someone yesterday who ran that newsletter. Go into a Reddit group, and if someone is debating like, oh, should I draft this quarterback or this quarterback, write a post where you're talking you're sort of analyzing it. You're like giving your feedback, and you're leading with that thought leadership, like I mentioned. And in the end, I'd put something like, hey, if you found this helpful, like, I actually just launched a newsletter where I help people draft the best fantasy football team. And not only will he see that, but if it's a good reply, which hopefully it is, a lot of people are going to see that as well. And that's something you can constantly replicate and do. That's something that actually we did like in the early days before I actually joined at Beehiiv. Was going in really like providing in-depth answering to questions on Quora, on Reddit, even on X, right? Like there are plenty of places where you can respond to people, really providing and like leading with value, and then just dropping your newsletter at the end and saying, hey, if you enjoyed that, feel free to check this out as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that doing that, especially on Reddit, can be super powerful. There are even tools that can help you do that, where they can provide a good answer that leads with the thought leadership and then sort of plugs your product at scale. One is called Reply Guy. I can't vouch for that product, but the fact that product exists, it should be strong evidence that that's a good strategy. So just if you're interested in writing a newsletter, you have to be interested in promoting it. So you can't be afraid to go out and reply to someone on Reddit. It's anonymous. Just go ahead and do it, and you'll be surprised what might get you some traction. Okay, well, we're almost out of time here. I'll ask one more question real quick, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. We talked about premium newsletters where you can have like sort of a free newsletter and then a paid newsletter. Do you have to have two separate newsletters for that? So, an example would be, I have this sort of free newsletter on fantasy football, since we're talking about, but then I have a premium newsletter that's sent separately, that has more premium content, more in-depth analysis, etc. Would you be able to sort of combine those into one newsletter where certain blocks within a newsletter are paywalled and other blocks are not? So you can just sort of send the same newsletter to one list. Is that possible with Beehiiv?
Yes.
Yeah.
So out of the box it is. Sorry, I'll take it, Alec. You can add to as well. So that's actually a really cool feature. You can create dynamic sections within your newsletter that will show both in newsletter and the web version based on the subscription level of that subscriber, whether they're free or paid. We're going to add more features as well. I know that is in the roadmap to even show and hide certain blocks dynamically based on tags or the type of subscription they have beyond just paid and free. But right now, the paid and free option is available, which works really well. I use that a lot.
Yeah, that's great to know. I think that it can be daunting for someone to think, oh man, I have to write a whole second newsletter. But if you could just easily, write it all in one place and then just restrict certain sections to the paid list, that seems to make it a lot easier, at least for me. So that's awesome to know that that's there and more features potentially may be coming. So yeah, this was great. I think that wraps up most of the questions. If anyone has anything that's burning, we'll have to get it in the next 2 minutes because I think this stream will end. But this was super helpful, guys. I learned a lot, and I've been using Beehiiv for a couple of years. So really appreciate you coming on and giving us some additional insights into Beehiiv. Again, you have Tyler or TG's email as well as Alex's email here. So if you want to reach out to them directly, I'm sure they'll be happy to answer any questions. You can also reach out to us at No Code Devs. We'd be happy to answer any questions. We don't know everything, but we've used the product extensively, so I'm sure we can point you in the right direction. So yeah, thanks so much, guys. This was awesome. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.